Okay, welcome back. We're flipping video for our final steps in RACCEE. We're coming down to the wire here. We've got an E and another E. Let's just review real quick. We did a restating of the question for our topic sentence. We've put a minimum of 5 good sentences together to give an answer in our own words. We've cited some evidence from the resource to back up our answer and provide evidence. And now we've come to these double E's. Well, you know how the two C's here represent two pieces of evidence? That's not the case with the double E's. They don't represent double of anything. They just kind of represent two ways to approach the ending. First, you're going to try to back out of this body paragraph by explaining what you just accomplished. But you're going to do it, obviously, in a way that will avoid using first-person narrative or second-person narrative. So the best way you can explain or summarize or make a conclusion about what was just accomplished here is to explain with an inference. All right, so we're going to do that with the first E here. And this last E, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek. This last E just basically is to end with a closing sentence. We'll be talking about that at another time. Let's focus on the explain with an inference, because we're going to back out of this body paragraph slowly. We're going to draw a conclusion for the reader about what just happened. So an inference statement is needed. Now let's talk real quick about what an inference statement is in general. Remember, an inference statement combines what you know about a topic with what is written. Now, when we first talked about inference statements in class, we talked about making inferences when we're reading novels. And so we were taking what we knew about a topic, combining it with what the author wrote in front of us in the books that we're reading, and then we drew our conclusions and made our inferences. Well, what does stay the same is that we are going to take what we know about the topic. That always stays the same. But instead of taking what someone else has written in a book, we're now going to use what we have just written ourselves in our body paragraphs to help us draw our conclusions. So in other words, we're going to use the answers that we just wrote in our body paragraphs along with the evidence that we just cited, and we're going to use those two steps to help us put together a statement that draws a logical conclusion about what just happened in the body paragraph. So our overall goal is to take our answers and our evidence, combine them with our logic, and then we're going to make a statement about well, we can kind of do it in a couple ways. Here's one way we can do it. We can talk about the author's craft. I mean, after all, most of our body paragraphs are going to be written about something that the author was crafty with. For example, some of you guys wrote about how the author crafted a plot conflict. What was it? You talked about it. Some of you guys might have written about how the author developed the climax, and you can talk about that. For my example, my author's craft was the ability that the author gave me to make a lot of text connections with the story. The author wrote that Ugly Pumpkin book in such a way that he was hoping that there would be connections made, world connections, self-connections. That was a craft. So you could focus on the author's craft for your inference statement, or possibly you might want to lean towards maybe a main character's actions, whether it be the protagonist or the antagonist. Maybe you're talking, most of your response to the essay question in the body paragraph you're writing has to do with the character's actions. 9 out of 10 times you're going to be mentioning a character of some sort in that particular story. So there's nothing wrong with focusing in on that character to make a general statement, draw a conclusion about what you just wrote about that character. Or maybe you want to just keep it more general. Maybe you want to just kind of look at what you wrote and think to yourself, well, how could I really put this in like a summary? Like, what just happened? Like, what was the purpose behind me writing this paragraph? Or in general, was there a message that I maybe should have learned from this part of the story that I was talking about? And general inference statements can be made about an event that maybe went on that you needed to discuss. Events and stories, the setting of a story, even like discussing the ending to a story and how the ending had so much meaning could be a way of approaching a general inference statement. Okay, moving along, we're going to either take one of those three approaches. Today I'm actually going to show you the author's craft, and I'm going to show you the character's actions approach to making an inference statement. All right, keep in mind that when you're making these statements, this is a great opportunity for you to work in some ELA terminology. This may be a chance for you to use words like protagonist or climax or plot conflict. Use as many ELA terms, as comfortably as you can when making your inference statements. Okay, here are the two sentence starters that you can choose from. These are the ones I would like you to work with for now. Later on in the year, we can play around with them more, and you can be more crafty and creative with it on your own author's craft approach. But for now, I'd like you to stick with these. Either choose an inference that can be made is, and then finish the statement, or I would like you to choose an it can be inferred that, and then finish your inference statement. Those are solid. They work 100% of the time. There's no questions asked. Just like the citing evidence has to be done in a certain way, I know for sure that these two sentence starters will be successful for you 100% of the time. So please use these for now, anyway. Okay, with that said, let's go back down to our example that I've been giving you, my ugly pumpkin example. It doesn't mean that you're going to copy this in your own practice. You're going to need to take what's here and apply this skill to your own practice. Okay, so let's take a look at how it works for me, and then we're going to give you some time to try to make an inference statement that works with your practice and what you've already written. Okay, quick review. I have my topic sentence. I restated the question here. I gave my first argument. It was a text-to-self connection. I spoke about how I made that connection here. Then I gave my second argument to my answer here with a text-to-world connection, and I spoke about that a little bit. Then I had my first citing evidence sentence here in the book titled The Ugly Pumpkin, evidence says, and I supported my first argument with my first text evidence. My second text evidence sentence was a way for me to support my second argument here, the text-to-world. So I've got my answer and my two pieces of evidence supporting my answers. Perfect. Now I want to back out of this body paragraph slowly. I want to lead the reader out. I want to lead the reader out with a statement that draws a conclusion about what just happened in this body paragraph. Probably the easiest one to do is the one where you are going to focus in on a character's actions. So I'm going to show you that one in the paragraph itself as part of the paragraph. There's no skipping lines, there's no indenting. We're still writing one body paragraph. We're just trying to get to the end of it. So here's that next step, and I chose the sentence starter, an inference that can be made. So here's what I wrote. An inference that can be made is that the protagonist, ugly pumpkin, protagonist, needed a little more time than most to figure out where he fit in life. So this poor little pumpkin just needed some time to finally figure out where he fit in at the Thanksgiving feast. I took what was written about the pumpkin, him not really fitting in, how I made that connection with him. He stood out from others. But then by the end of the story, he did fit in. It just took him a little bit longer. That was my conclusion. Oh yeah, based on what I wrote, based on what I know about the pumpkin, and based on what I know about life, not everybody fits in right away. Sometimes people take longer paths to see where they're going to end up. You know what? That's my inference. It clicked for me. All I had to do was focus in on the character, and there's my inference statement. I used the word protagonist because it's an ELA term. And boy, did this sound nice. It's professional. An inference that can be made is that the protagonist needed a little more time than most to figure out where he fit in life. Now, I was almost tempted not to show you this second example because I didn't really want to discourage you. This is a really hard approach, the authorcraft one. But I think some of you guys can handle this. In an authorcraft approach to an inference statement, basically you want to take what it is that you're writing about. In this case, I was writing about text connections. That's the authorcraft. For you, it might be the climax, or the theme of the story, or the central conflict. You want to focus in on that. And then based on what you know about text connections, oops, sorry about that, guys. And based on what you know about text connections, along with what you just wrote here about this specific story with regards to the authorcraft being discussed, you want to draw a conclusion based on that. It's a little more challenging, but it can be done, and it looks like this. I use this sentence starter just to switch things up. It can be inferred that a deeper understanding of the protagonist, so a better understanding of the ugly pumpkin, is achieved when making text connections. Now, I got this deeper understanding right off of the notes that we took for text connections or making connections, that anchor chart right there on my e-board and right there in the room. The reason why we want to make text connections and make connections in general is so that we understand more deeply the characters and the story itself. So I borrowed that information I learned about making connections, and I built it into the reasoning behind why I was doing this paragraph to begin with. Anytime you're answering an essay about making connections, overall your goal for making any text connection is to understand the reading better, have a deeper understanding. So it can be inferred that by making text connections to the pumpkin throughout the story, I was able to understand him better. So my inference statement followed suit. It can be inferred that a deeper understanding of the protagonist is achieved when making text connections. If you wanted to try this second example for a practice today, I say go for it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to work with just the character itself and make a general inference conclusion about your character and what was written about your character. Or maybe you do want to say, hey, you know, what did I get out of writing about plot conflict? What did I get out of the climax? Or what did I learn by writing about the theme of the story? It can be inferred that by addressing the theme of the story, a life lesson can be learned. Maybe, I just did that on the fly, obviously. It wasn't practice. But maybe it can be inferred that by focusing on the theme of the story, life lessons can be learned, or life lessons emerge, or something to that effect. That could be one for theme. So something to consider. Either one of those two focuses can work for you. That's all I'm going to share with you for now. We'll take another time and another practice to maybe talk about the third approach, just doing an inference based on the topic in general. We really don't need to do that right now. I know that your practice will allow you to do an authorcraft or a character-based inference, so let's just focus on those two for now. When we get to essay questions later on that maybe ask you to talk about the setting or a specific event that occurred in the story, then it'll be in more general terms. But for now, let's maybe do the character or try the authorcraft approach, whichever you feel most comfortable with. You don't have to do both, and you shouldn't do both. You only want to have one inference statement. Okay, so give it a try. Apply this skill to your paragraph. It has to work with what you are writing about, and you want to add it right on. And we'll keep going from there. We only have one more step, and we're done, guys. We're going to end with a closing sentence next time. See you on the flip side.